Good morning and welcome. Noting a quorum, much more than a quorum, and the successful return of the warrant, I'm calling this town meeting in order. I'm Jimmy Recor, I'm your moderator.
Hey, hand a round of applause. Come on, wake up.
I do it because nobody else will run. Okay, we're going to go over, first I'd like to introduce the principals of the meeting. On this side of me, there's the select board, there's the town administrator, there's the town council. On this side, these are members of boards and committees, the town clerk, finance committee, capital improvements committee, personnel committee. The town treasurer's here. Excuse me.
And we all have openings.
That is true. Sorry, that is true. But these people are all in play because they are the ones, if you have questions on an article, they're going to be the ones who can answer it. And somebody up here in this mix is going to be able to make you understand, hopefully, and work the question you can so we can move along. We're good with that? Yes. Okay. Also in the attendance are, thank you, school superintendents who are not usually residents, and if they need to speak, we need to give them, if someone's not from town and wishes to speak, we need to give them permission. We usually handle that on a case-by-case basis, and, you know, we're usually pretty good about it, and that's great. Okay, the purpose of a town meeting, to conduct the yearly business of the town from the budget and finances to material needs, highway, fire, EMS purchases, police equipment, or administrative needs, correcting or adding to town policies or bylaws, or just keeping the town compliant with whatever changing world we live in. How town meetings work. You have received the town warrant. You have received annual report, and you probably pick up the warrant light on the way in. Each warrant article is the town's suggestion on how we deal with each topic covered by a warrant article. Each article will be read in order of listing on the warrant. After each is read, the select board will enter a motion for consideration to the floor, after which a second to the motion will be asked for. A further explanation of the motion, if a further explanation of the motion is needed, the principal most able to explain will try to do just that. Then the floor will open for discussion on a motion. Speakers must be residents or gain permission to speak. To speak, you must raise your hand and be recognized by the moderator before moving to or being handed a microphone before speaking. Please state your name and please keep your comments to within a 2-minute period. During discussion, some behavior is unacceptable and may cause you to forfeit your right to speak. Vulgarity and personal attacks will not be tolerated by this moderator. Raising your voice and talking over the 2-minute mark may also cause the same end result. The moderator would like to limit each citizen to speaking only once per article. During discussion of each article, please keep in mind that if someone else has a different opinion than you, that doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means that their life experience has led them to a different place than you are. And that's okay here. During discussion, we may decide to vote for an article as is, to amend or change it. We could also decide to table it, put it aside to another time. Each article is open to many parliamentary motions, and these are outlined in the handbook Town Meeting Time, published by the Mass Moderators Association in 1962 and adopted by the town at town meeting vote in 2023. Electronic voting. You have your clickers. The green button is yes. The red button is no. And yellow is abstain. That's really all you need to know. And you can be rest assured that you can hit this a million times during a call for the vote. It's only going to register the last button you push. We have tried this all the time, and what I'd like to do when we're talking about it right now, I'd like all of you to take your controller and press one of the 3 colored buttons. This way we test whether they're all working or not. You should get an okay on your screen when you press the button. So let's do that right now.
I see okay. Button 4 and 5 don't work.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
100. We're cool.
Great idea.
Okay. That's cool. They work, believe it or not. That's wonderful. Okay, before we get going on the articles, I'd just like to point out, because it was pointed out to me, that there's a handout, there's a questionnaire out there from the town about areas for the town to focus on. What is important to you? And they would like you to try to somehow, while we're conducting this meeting, think about it and fill this out and leave it outside so they can see what's important to you. Okay? Ready? Article 1. To hear if the reports of the Select Board, Capital Improvement, Planning Committee, Town Treasurer, Town Clerk, School Committee, Tax Collector, Board of Health, Planning Board, and any other committees, and act thereon.
I move that town meeting vote to accept the town reports as printed in the town annual report.
There's a second. Any discussion? Okay, let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting's closed. Article passes. 98 for, 3 against. Article 2. To hear the report of the Finance Committee and vote to raise and appropriate such funds of money as may be deemed necessary to defray the town charges for the year ensuing, or take any other action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate for line items 114 moderator through 900 employee cost of Article 2 as presented in the warrant for a subtotal of $3,193,292.
Second? Discussion. Okay, so let's vote on it. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Article 2 passes 90 yes, 5 noes, 3 abstentions.
I move that the town
Try yours. Try it again.
Hello? There we go.
There you go.
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate for line items under Conway Grammar School of Article 2 as presented in the warrant for a subtotal of $2,325,463.
Second? Any discussion? Let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting's closed. Article passes 74 for, 7 against, 5 abstentions.
Item C, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate for line items under Frontier Regional School, Article 2, as presented in the warrant for a subtotal of $1,487,174.
I have a second. Any discussion? Let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 79 for, 4 against, 6 abstentions.
Item D, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate for line items Franklin County Technical School of Article 2 as presented in the warrant for a subtotal of $158,510.
I have a second. Any discussion? Let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 95 for, 3 against, 1 abstention.
Item E, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate for line items under other technical schools of Article 2 as presented in the warrant for a subtotal of $0 for a school's appropriation subtotal of $3,971,247 and a total in Article 2 of $7,164,539.
I have a second. Any discussion? Let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 75 for, 2 against, 5 abstentions. Article 3, to see if the town will vote to set the salaries of elected officials as provided by Mass General Law 41, Section 108, to be made effective from July 1st, 2026, as presented in the budget or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to set the salaries of elected officials as provided by Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 41, Section 108, to be made effective from July 1st, 2026, as presented in the budget.
I have a second. Any discussion? Okay, let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 94, 9 against, 2 abstain. Article 4, to see if the town will vote to authorize the treasurer, collector, or assistant treasurer collector to enter into compensating balance agreements for fiscal year 2026 as permitted by Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53F, or take any other action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to authorize the treasurer and collector to enter into compensating balance agreements.
I have a second. Any discussion? This is a request for clarification on that.
Did you want to? Yeah.
This is just an article that allows the treasurer collector to make agreements with banking institutions. It's pretty simple, straightforward, something we have to do. Does that answer your question? Yes.
What is the 302? What is the 2?
Oh, that's because when you see the vote for the finance committee that says 302, that just means the 2 weren't present. It's a committee of 5.
Any other discussion? Let's vote.
They were absent that day.
Five more seconds. Vote is closed. Motion passes 104, 1 against, 1 abstain. Article 5, to see if the town will vote to allow the select board to apply for, accept, and expend state, federal, and other grants which do not require a town appropriation or a town meeting approval or take any other action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to allow the select board to apply for, accept, and expend state, federal, and other grants which do not require a town appropriation or town meeting approval.
A second? I have a second. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
I've asked the question a lot of times, but I've never quite understood everything there is to know about grants, because sometimes we get a grant and we say it's free. Can somebody explain to me why it's free or how it's not free? Because somebody has to give somebody that kind of money in order to give a grant.
So either you or I can take this. I can say that some grants have a match, which would mean that the town has to provide a certain percentage of the grant funding. Other grants are no match, which means it's 100% free to the town. As far as where they come from, most come from state funding. I believe it's at the committee. Do you want to? Well, I know that 75% of grants typically come from
Housing.
I'm sorry, I'm blanking on this.
Yeah, I don't know where 75% of the grants come from. I have a question. I have some more questions.
So,
Could you state your name, please?
my name is Patrick Lynch. So I'm wondering why you're asking to not approve the spending of the grants. Like, I understand why we wouldn't. So you're asking to not have town or articles to spend that money, right?
Basically, this is blanket permission, and there's permission in statutes as well for town officials to apply for grants. And then this article allows them to expend it if there's not matching funds or something that should be
So
appropriated by.
I don't understand why we need to get that permission to expend it without needing, it should be, I don't see why we shouldn't apply for grants. It should be able to apply for grants, but why should you be spending it without approval? So you just get to the, and, these two, who are the two finance committee members that aren't present for the votes?
Do you want to do one question at a time?
I'm sorry, who are the two
That's-
finance committee people that aren't present for the votes?
We'll do it. Yeah. Hi, Alan Singer, Finance Committee Chair for the Roaring Brook Road. Yeah, Roy Cohen is not present, and Tom Donovan.
Are they part of the committee? Is there a reason why they're not? Is there a reason why they're not present for any of this?
Well, they weren't available the day we voted, so I mean, and we do have an opening now in the Finance Committee. But
Okay. I mean, that's part of the question. That's part of my question is that, so we have an opening on the finance committee
yeah, yes, that's correct.
and that we have two members that aren't really active.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'd like to
Thank
answer
you.
the question about the grants. Many grants now, especially from state and federal agencies, are reimbursable, which requires the town to encumber funds up front and then reimburse.
I still think that we need to decide where those grants are being used and not.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to talk to the finer points of grants, having managed millions of them myself.
I would just suggest that we vote against that because of that reason. I think
Well,
you should have
so
separated
here's
those
the
two
problem,
things.
and I'd like to mention that. So grants are required to be applied for on behalf of the town. You just can't apply for a grant.
But that's not how it was set up.
And so in terms of grants, like for the USDA, for the state, and how these grants work is that there needs to be some type of resolution on behalf of the town for the grant to be applied. And then the grants have to be expended the way they're approved. It's a contract. And the town has to sign a contract, and the contract outlines that with specificity.
So when we got the money for the $200,000 that we're going to use for the grader, that was a fund that was from a grant, right?
No.
No,
Okay. It was a disaster fund.
it was
It
money that
says
was
disaster
awarded to
fund
state
under it.
for disaster based on a fund that an estimate, a budget that we set up that was an estimate.
So that's,
Not a grant.
And that was not outside, so it's not a grant, and it's outside of the operating budget, annual town
I'm not-
operating budget.
sure. I think those two things should have been separated, and I think we should vote against it because of that.
Okay, thank you very much.
To the gentleman back there, thanks for reminding me, Alan. Up to 75% of grants do come from USDA.
Okay, any other discussion?
We have a question from someone who's been a grant provider for clarification.
Hi, Sadie Sullivan. I live on South Shirk. I feel like this might be helpful to know as somebody who has been like the person who selects what orgs get grants, that one, the matching is basically to say, it's like, are you gonna do what you say you're gonna do?
if you are, put your money in too. So if I'm putting my money in to support you, you all put your money in. So that's why sometimes they ask for a match. And then the other thing to know is that grant applications are usually pretty difficult, and they require a lot of checks and balances, and they require a lot of detail. Like some of the grant, I've been part of the, anyway, won't go into the details, but they will want to know, like, what brand of tape are you buying to stick that to the wall? And so, which is to say, I hear there's the need for like checks and balances of how the town is spending money, and when grants are giving out that money, often that's built into the grant body giving the money. They want to know all those details. So there's not going to be like freewheeling spending of grant money because the grant provider really doesn't want that to happen either.
Okay, thank you. And can you wait for a microphone?
Hi, I'm Julia Washburn. I live on New Hall Road, and I'm requesting clarification. My understanding of this article is this: we give permission to the town to apply for grants that are available, let's say from USDA or some other entity. We are giving you permission to apply for those grants. My understanding is that when you apply for a grant, it's very specific what the grant is for, and the only way you can spend it is according to what the grant requests is, about what specifically what they say, and there's onerous reporting. So I'm just questioning, that is what we're voting for, the permission to apply for, receive, and expend those grants as written by the grantor.
Go ahead.
Yes, that's exactly correct. And as both of you have said, when you're applying for a grant, you have to give a very, very detailed budget of how you will expend those funds. So in giving permission to apply for the grants, basically you've set up what the expenditures will be.
And remember in the article, it says, do not require a town appropriation, meaning no match. So we're asking for permission to get 100% funded grants and to be able to use those grants.
Any other discussion? Okay, let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 104 for, 5 against. Article 6. To see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash $75,000 to the Conway Grammar School Capital Stabilization Fund or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to transfer $75,000 from free cash to the Conway Grammar School Stabilization Fund.
Do I have a second? Any discussion? Let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 104 for, 7 against.
7 against or abstain?
Against or abstain?
No abstain. Against. None. I will do that differently.
Sure.
Article 7, to see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash $75,000 to the Fire Truck Stabilization Fund as follows. Fire Department, $75,000 to save for a new rescue pumper, expected purchase in 2028, or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to transfer $75,000 from free cash to the fire truck stabilization fund.
I have a second on the motion. Any discussion? Let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 103 yes, 7 no. Article 8. To see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash $75,000 to the ambulance stabilization fund as follows. Ambulance Department, $75,000 to purchase a new ambulance or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to transfer $75,000 from free cash to the ambulance stabilization fund.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
What's the balance in our free cash account at this point?
Balance?
Before town meeting, it's approximately $613,000. It's above the recommended guideline because what we've had over the last couple of years, we've had other assets come in well above what we had projected. And so we end up having quote-unquote windfalls of extra cash because of increase in other assets. I don't know what they are, but they've increased by about 75% each of the last 2 years.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion is approved. 106 for, 1 against, 1 abstention. Article 9. To see if the town will vote to approve the creation of a new highway stabilization fund to be used for the purchase of highway vehicles and equipment, or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to approve the creation of a new highway stabilization fund.
I have a second on the motion. Any discussion? Could you please wait? Thank you.
Bessie Lynch, South Circuit Road, and just a question of clarification. If this is voted through and the stabilization fund is created, do we vote again to approve expenditures from that fund?
Yes, and it needs to be a 2/3.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, no? I'm sorry, did I say something?
Under the new Municipal Modernization Act, your general stabilization needs a 2/3 vote to take money out of it. The new special stabilization accounts only need a majority vote to take the money out of it. This is, in creating a special one, you need a 2/3 vote, but once you create it, so that the fire truck stabilization, the ambulance stabilization, this highway stabilization are all considered special stabilization accounts, so that now only a majority vote is needed to remove money from it.
Nelson, wait for a microphone, please.
Yes, hi, Nelson Shiflett, Shelburne Falls Road. So I need some clarification. Is this stabilization fund designed to replace the stabilization fund that already exists for fire trucks, for ambulance, and so on?
This is for the highway department. So
Okay.
the pumper truck is for the fire.
Yeah.
The ambulance obviously is for EMS. So because of the drastic increase in cost for vehicles and equipment, we felt it appropriate that we set up a stabilization fund for the higher cost of large equipment for highway department.
Okay, so I guess I need further clarification on why funds coming out of this account would only require a majority vote instead of a two-thirds vote. Because overall, I think that my view of the stabilization funds, it's a good idea, it's good planning, it makes a lot of sense, but we're talking about a major expenditure down the road, say of $800,000 for a piece of equipment, and we're only looking for an additional $75,000 to add to that account to make that purchase. It may lend to create a situation where people are asking fewer questions because we already have the money put aside. I don't think that's the goal of the stabilization fund. It's for good planning. And I think that the two-thirds majority vote is a good guarantee that that's more likely to happen.
State law now says you only need a majority vote. It's state law.
I'd like to make a motion to add a two-thirds majority vote to the highway stabilization fund.
You can't do that. You can't do that. State law says it's a majority vote, and you can't have a law that's different from state law.
I don't think we should approve the stabilization fund at that point. I think that we should have made it a non-special stabilization fund. That's what you were just saying, and it should be a two-thirds majority. Or we should vote against it.
Well, you could put it all in the general stabilization and withdraw from there.
Right in front of me here.
Morgan, I live on Cricket Hill Road, and I'd like to point out, unless I'm reading it wrong, this is just about creating the fund, neither putting money in nor taking money out. It is just about creating the fund. But I also agree with Nelson, like as soon as we have a fund, we're going to start thinking we should put money in it, and it's have a pile, we're going to think we should spend it. So anyway, but again, we're just voting on creating the fund.
Correct.
So you are correct. The next article would be about placing money in the fund. To what Nelson said, that is our idea, is that if we have a large item that is hundreds of thousands of dollars, we want to have a stabilization fund so everyone knows, just like the pumper truck and just like the ambulance, that that money is going and being appropriated into a fund to pay for something that we can't pay for in 1 year.
Jane Holy, and I just wonder, you already have a general fund, so that money is just going to continue to gain in your general stabilization fund that you already have. So how many stabilization funds, and where does any of the money that is in the other stabilization funds have the ability to go into these special stabilization funds?
Have to be a town vote, right? Yeah. That would have to be a town vote for that to happen.
Okay, all right.
Alan Singer, Finance Committee here. So currently we have 5 stabilization funds, including the General Stabilization Fund. The General Stabilization Fund is really a best practice recommended by the Mass Department of Revenue, Division of Local Services, that there should be money just in case there's a shortfall of town receipts, and our town's property taxes with most towns. For whatever reasons, it could be of a reval, a deval, major economic downturn, whatever. But I just want to get back to the rationale, because I'm actually the loudmouth who proposed the Highway Stabilization Fund. Outside of Conway Grammar School, the second largest budget of this town, and I might add a second by far versus number 3 and beyond in terms of individual items, is the Highway Department. And over the next several years, we're facing well into the 6 figures of purchases to replace equipment. And so with this, what we have is we have the ability now, we won't have to borrow money. And with interest rates as they are, I think it's very prudent that we start putting money away, so if we have to borrow money, we can also negotiate for better terms from our lenders. It could be the state, it could be from a private bank. and that, because we're putting more equity, quote unquote, towards a project, so it makes a lot of sense. So it's good to do. We have it for the Conway Grammar School. We have it for the highway department, for the fire department, for the ambulance department. We have some big individual pieces of equipment that have to be replaced over the next several years in the highway department. And it's best to sock the money now for a rainy day while we have the extra free cash. Because based on the economic uncertainties, who knows what it'll be like next year. It could be very different.
Thank you, Alan. Way in the back?
Alex Caswell, Reedsbridge Road. It sounds like a lot of people are having second thoughts about not having a 2/3 majority to get the money out. And it sounds like for some reason Boston is telling us that we have to have that, which don't love that, but anyway. Is there a way to put money into, say, the capital stabilization account and have it be restricted for the purposes of the highway department and therefore require it to have a 2/3 majority vote in order to access those funds?
There's no way to just restrict funds within the general stabilization account for the highway. So, as we know, the general stabilization account requires 2/3 to remove it. But you can't take, say, all of the general stabilization is for general purposes except we've put in 75,000 that we want held aside. That's the whole point of these special stabilizations. And it was DOR and the state that made the determination that it would be a majority vote rather than a 2/3 vote. So
And we
there's
can't-
nothing we can do about that.
And we definitely can't amend our bylaws to say we want to have a 2/3 majority vote?
No, you can't have a bylaw that's in direct contradistinction to a state statute. If the state statute gave you the option, you could certainly do that. But because the state statute says it will be a majority vote, you can't pass a bylaw that says differently.
Thanks.
Mr. Lynch, I'm just going to remind you, I'd like people to speak once on each article. So somebody else who hasn't, go ahead. And I see you.
I just wanted to call the question.
Oh.
Can
We
I
have
call
motion-
the question?
We have a motion to call a question. And a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. We're going to vote on Article 9. And go ahead. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 97 yes, 12 no. Article 10, to see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash $25,000 to the Highway Stabilization Fund or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to transfer $25,000 from free cash to the Highway Stabilization Fund.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Bessie Lynch again. I have a question. Are there any requirements of the highway department to make their request to remove funds from the stabilization fund? So for instance, do they have to submit a budget before they put it to the town for a vote? Or an audit, or?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
And it was subject of much debate and iteration during the wee months of January, February, March on Monday evenings. And I would really encourage people to listen to cable access TV or even come to the meetings, because it's actually a tremendous amount of discussion that goes back and forth. I mean, we have to submit a balanced budget to the state every year, but not without great iteration and sometimes spirited discussion amongst the varying committees and groups.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify, because I know the select board submits the budget. I'm asking, does the highway department,
Yes.
they are
The
giving
answer
the
is yes.
numbers
Yeah,
and
that's a
breaking it
warrant
down?
article
Okay.
draft, and the warrant articles for this town shut on April 28th this year.
And it goes through the Capital Improvement Committee, the Finance Committee, and the Select Board.
And I can
Okay,
clarify
before it makes
that.
it to us.
Effectively, all the department heads that make a capital required to submit a form to capital, it's discussed, we vote on it, and then we make our recommendations to select board. And that's the process that Alan was describing. By the way, I'm Phyllis Crane, Chair, Capital. And all of those select board meetings are public, so anybody is welcome to attend any of those meetings and comment and say whatever you like.
Any other discussion? Don Siegel?
We also have a request for the chair of the Finance Committee to speak closer to the microphone.
Thank you.
In the interest of transparency, and because it's difficult to spend a lot of hours watching a lot of meetings, is there any type of summary, an outline, or description of how the capital expenses are being planned for? It would be like a budget, but we're being asked to set aside a lot of money now without a real understanding of the big picture. How long is an ambulance or a fire truck going to last? When do we replace it? You know, how many hours or years, that type of thing.
Yes, sir.
Jimmy?
When we restarted the Capital Improvement Committee, I created a Excel spreadsheet that has every single piece of equipment that we own, and highway, police, fire, and ambulance. It shows the initial cost. It shows what a replacement would cost. It shows the lifespan expectancy, which can also include the hours if there's not miles. It shows, like I said, the date we're looking at a replacement. So what we've been doing over the last 3 years, the highway department was not really on a 5 to 7 year schedule of replacements that we wanted to see. We've gotten up to that point. So we're hoping if the article is passed this year, there's actually only 2 other items within the next 6 years that would need, that are scheduled for replacement. But you can find that on our website.
If you go onto the town website, under capital improvements, there's a PDF that you can download that is the spreadsheet that Chris just referenced.
What's the name?
Sir?
It's called the capital schedule.
Maynard Stowe, and my question is, why is this so little if we're going to be needing a lot of equipment over the next 10 years?
Well, like I said, we only have a couple items after this town, maybe a couple, it could be 5, that we're looking at replacing over the next 6 years. This is just to fund the account for now. We don't have a particular item that is reserved for the 25,000.
Alan Singer, Finance Committee Chair. So the state certifies something called free cash, which are the receipts that we receive over and above expenditures. And that's usually the end of September, early October. So we kind of put the cart before the horse in deciding our town budget before we actually know the final expenditures and receipts. It's what everyone does, and it's unfortunate, but that's what we have to deal with. So in answering your question, so little, we could have a special town meeting latter part of this year, and if our free cash comes in ahead of what we project, then we could actually make the move to put more into the stabilization funds, including the Highway Stabilization Fund.
Yeah, you'll also notice on the votes that we already did for the other stabilization funds, there was a 25% reduction this year as opposed to the last 3 years. That was to keep the budget low.
At this point, the State Department of Revenue has not come in with an estimate for the future revenue receipts. We don't usually get that until October. So the annual town meeting that we might have would be probably in early December, and by then we'll have a clearer picture.
Any other discussion, Article 10?
Jimmy,
Bob Armstrong.
This is such a big issue every year, and I just want to look at a little bit of history. But for many years, the town has very agreeably put money in the capital stabilization fund. And we do that with a majority vote. And then when we come to spend it to buy what we believe is an important piece of equipment, we need a two-thirds majority. And usually we are a couple votes short of a two-thirds majority. And year after year, and you may think this is great, you want to deny the town that equipment. I don't know. But year after year, you deny us the ability to buy that piece of equipment, and we put it off for the next year. And maybe you want to punish us, or I don't know. But I can tell you what it feels like. Now, we could have just asked you for that money directly and not put it in the stabilization fund, and I believe it would have passed because way more than a majority of the people voted to spend it out of the stabilization fund. But we didn't, because we think that it's a good idea to save it up and to spend it out of the stabilization fund. And then the town says, too many people say no. And so, I am puzzled. I can tell you that I am thrilled that the state is saying we can spend it with a majority vote, just like we can spend it to put it in there with a majority vote. I like using the stabilization fund, but we don't have to do that. We could just ask you for that money directly in every calendar year. And I believe a majority of the people of Conway believe that we need to buy that new tractor rather than not be able to, and have to maintain a lot of old equipment that barely works. I think taking care of our roads is important. So most of the things that we're asking for are things that have been on the warrant article in the past, and that you said no, because we couldn't quite get enough votes in a two-thirds majority to get it out of the capital stabilization fund. So I just want to tell you what it feels like to be on this committee where we are trying to buy good equipment for the town, because plowing our roads is important, and you guys like having your dirt roads graded, and you like having your snow plowed. So anyway.
Bob, thank you very much.
Just a comment, thank you.
Thank you very much, but your 2 minutes is up. We have a motion to call the question. And a second. Okay, we'll do this with a voice vote. Yes on calling the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. Let's vote on Article 10. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 104, 10 against, 1 abstention. Article 11. Phyllis, would you like to say anything at this time?
Yeah, I will actually. So just to clarify before we vote on Article 11, what you're going to be voting on is what Bob Armstrong just described. And the reason why this article is here is because we do not yet have a highway capital stabilization fund. We have a general town stabilization fund that up until this point, that's where the highway equipment that was voted on, that's where the funds were coming from. So I just want to make that clear that going forward with the creation of a highway capitalization fund, you're not going to see these large requests to buy equipment seemingly out of nowhere, because every year from now on, now that a highway stabilization fund has been approved and will be created, we will be adding to that fund for highway equipment. And then when the time comes to acquire it, you will therefore vote on a majority vote basis for that highway equipment, just like we do for the ambulance and just like we do for the fire department. And if you need to know in advance when those equipment, those highway department equipment requests may be coming up, as I said in my previous comment, you can go to the Capital Improvement Committee website and look at the spreadsheet that Chris Waldo just referenced, which goes out several years for all of the equipment that the highway department has. And if for some reason you can't find it and you can't seem to download it, please get in touch with me and I'll make sure you get a copy.
Okay, thank you. Article 11, to see if the town will vote to transfer $120,000 from capital stabilization for the purchase of a highway excavator or take any action relative thereto. A 2/3 vote is required.
That's wrong.
changed.
I
Oh,
advised,
oh.
Veronique wrong. That's a.
Town council
valid
advises us that the 2/3 vote is incorrect.
I move that the town vote to transfer $120,000 from the Capital Stabilization Fund to purchase a highway excavator.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. She's already walking your way with a microphone.
I'm just curious why we need an excavator.
I can take that. It's probably one of the pieces of equipment that's used the most, like for,
Yeah, you need to be,
it's the piece of equipment that's, well, from what I can say anecdotally, is probably used the most by the highway department. As an example, you know, Conway has no storm sewers. We have no town water and sewer. So where I live on Main Poland Road, the highway department, after every single washout, and we've had a lot of them because we've had a lot of flooding events, they're always up there using the excavator to move the stones back into the gravel gullies that are on each side of the road. Additionally, the highway department is generally the party who is doing excavation for new town buildings. They did it for the public safety building, and the plan is hopefully that they will also do the excavation for the new pickleball courts. So it's the kind of equipment that is pretty essential. And the day that I did this presentation, by the way, I couldn't take a picture of the excavator because it was being used on Shelburne Falls Road.
What's going on with the current excavator?
If you look on the schedule, it's old, and it's due to be replaced.
So we're trying, you'll see with the excavator and the tractor, what we're trying to do is find the sweet spot of making sure that we don't have a piece of equipment that requires a lot of maintenance, which requires, you know, man hours to take it back and forth to a garage, and also, you know, the cost of repairs, and that the piece of equipment also retains value for trade-in.
And I would just say that if we're going to now grade the dirt roads, do we need the excavator still? Because we're not rebuilding the roads every time like he has been.
Sir?
Tim Morgan, Old Cricket Hill Road. So I don't know whether, you know, how old the excavator is, or if you look down the next couple of articles, the tractor or the grader, all three of which they're asking for money to, although from different sources. But so I don't know the ins and outs of that, but I do know that, or I've been told that Conway's cost for maintaining its roads is much higher than surrounding towns, and that most towns either decide to buy new equipment and, you know, pay the extra money and then not have to maintain it, or they build themselves a fancy new maintenance garage. Conway has done both. We buy new equipment and we have a fancy maintenance garage. And so we're paying more per mile for maintenance than anybody else. And I just wonder, it always seems like there's a drunken sailor in charge of the spending of the highway department. And you know, it feels like it's the second highest budget item and the only one that we can really draw a line in.
So I'll say this, in every town it's the second highest. And FERCog came out with a list showing the towns in Franklin, of course Franklin County, and the spending for each highway department based on not only budget but miles, and we're smack dab in the middle. So it's a misconception that has happened since I came here. It seems that every time a highway item comes up, it's the one that's discussed the most, and I get it. It's because it's the highest spending outside of schools. So, but if you go on FERCog, you'll see that as a common misconception in this town, that we are not spending more than other towns, and that we're smack dab in the middle.
Okay. Stand correct? I guess.
Hi, Julie Washburn, Newhall. I would just like to point out that given the uncertainty in the economic times that we're living and the potential tariffs that may be coming our way, it may be prudent for us to make these expenses now rather than to put them off into the future.
Yes, and if you look at our old meetings, some of the video of our old meetings, that has been brought up many times. Thank you.
Oh.
Gayla Elwell, Shelburne Falls Road. I'm trying to understand how the Highway Stabilization Fund, which we just voted in, relates to the capital stabilization with this equipment that is highway equipment, and just how those, when will the Highway Stabilization Fund be the place that these funds come from?
Sure. So capital is all-encompassing of fire, ambulance, highway, building. It's all large items that encompass the entire town. It's not restricted to the highway. It's not restricted to fire. It's not restricted to EMS. That's why we're trying to separate.
When will that separation happen? Because these are all highway equipment. I just don't understand when that will be separated out, or if that's the purpose?
Yeah, when we have money in the highway stabilization account.
We just created it, so we don't have money in it yet.
It'll be going forward. Be going forward, not this year. Correct.
Any other discussion? Nelson Shiflett.
I recall that in years past, before we had the stabilization funds, before that plan was put into effect, which again, I'm in favor of, I recall that generally when we wanted to make a major purchase, a piece of equipment, you know, anything above $50,000, sometimes way more than that there would be a brief explanation about why we needed that piece of equipment, and how many hours or how many miles were on it, and so on. And I think that it would really shorten the discussion about these issues if that information could be provided again. For example, this excavator. I know that it's been in the plan, but the plan is not cast in stone. It makes sense to plan ahead that 4 or 5 years from now, we're going to need a piece of equipment. But if that piece of equipment gets used less for whatever reason, or it turns out to be particularly durable and we've had no problems with it, it would be nice to know that we could vote based on that information. So in the past, we've had Ron Sweet get up and talk to us about virtually every piece of equipment. Bob Baper would talk to us about fire equipment. And I'm not saying that that's necessary again, but perhaps the select board, perhaps Chris could tell us that originally we planned to replace this piece of equipment in 4 or 5 years. That time has passed, and it's had the amount of use that we expect, or we've had repair bills or not, because perhaps that purchase could actually be put off for a year or two.
Nelson, I think we've tried to get a lot more organized as a committee. So we've formed the capital committee, or brought it back to life. We've posted all this on the website. We've had tons of meetings. Now what we should do is print out that, we had the pre-town meeting where we went over all of this stuff. So we've made a lot of effort to get this information out here. Seems like one thing we could do is print out that list and have it available for people to see. But all that effort was to inform everybody and not have to have all that happen at the last minute at town meeting. People could organize their thoughts ahead of time, look over all the research we've done, take in all the data and not have it be a last-minute decision on town meeting floor. All that information is out there right now. We can print that out. We will print that out in the future and have that available before town meeting. But that is all our efforts to not have this be some political or emotional decision on town meeting floor about some opinion about how your road is kept, but real data about hours, where the equipment is at, and all that. And all of these people put a ton of hours into making sure that information is out there. So, anyway, that's my update.
I see you. Let's go there first. I know you're there, Peter.
Chris Bathurst, Williamsburg Road. I just want to give a vote of confidence to the planning board, the select board. I know you all do a lot of work. You bring a lot of information here. I don't feel like we need to debate this every time. So I just want to share that with my community here and with you all.
Thank you. Peter Jeswald.
Just what he said.
Oh. Keep it under 2 minutes, Bob.
I'm making sure. People are asking for data. If you look on this spreadsheet that we are being pointed to, you will see this is a 2019 piece of equipment. So it's not ancient. It had a projected life of 5 years. We wanted to buy it last year. We weren't able to get a 2/3 vote to pass it. So we're asking for money again. Ron believes that he can get a much better trade-in value if we trade in the equipment before it is derelict. The town traditionally has said, I drive a pickup truck that's 20 years old. And I admit, I drive a pickup truck that's 20 years old. So why doesn't the town just use that equipment until it's derelict and it no longer works? The problem is we use this equipment every day. Thank God I don't have to use my pickup truck every day. So thank
Sorry,
you.
I just want to make a clarification. This was not on last year. It didn't pass the Capital Improvement Committee as far as getting on the article. We took it down to not burden the town with too much spending in one department. Again, that's why we're trying to get on a 5 to 7 year plan for larger pieces of equipment, so you're not hit with a huge sum in 1 year.
So I just want to remind everybody that the maintenance of the roads in Conway is not a matter of convenience. It is a matter of public safety, because I don't think anybody who lives in this town, who's in this room, who either lives on a paved or unpaved road, would not want to be able to have the ambulance or the fire department get down that road because the roads are not maintained.
Excuse me. I heard a motion to move the question. And a second. So, we're going to vote on moving the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Let's vote on Article 11. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion is approved, 95 for, 19 against, 1 abstention. Article 12, to see if the town will vote to transfer $44,000 from the capital stabilization for the purchase of a highway tractor or take any action relative thereto. Is that also a straight vote, not a 2/3 vote? Right. Okay, so that's a straight vote, not a 2/3, per town council.
I move that the town vote to transfer $44,000 from the Capital Stabilization Fund to purchase a highway tractor.
I have a second on that motion. Any discussion? You in the back, sir.
Alex Caswell, Reese Ridge Road. So it sounds like in the past, these all required 2/3 votes, and now it's majority vote. What changed?
The interpretation of the law per state.
Thank you.
I would just like to say that I didn't really appreciate the safety comment. If you lived on South Starkshire Road, you might wonder how safe the road was.
Any other discussion? Okay, let's vote. Article 12. Five more seconds. Okay, voting is closed. Motion passes 89 for, 17 against, no abstentions. Article 13. To see if the town will vote to transfer $200,000 from the state disaster relief funds for the purchase of a used highway grader or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to transfer $200,000 from the state disaster relief funds for the purchase of a used highway grader.
I have a second. Discussion? It's coming toward you.
So that's money set aside for the disaster fixing the roads, right?
Fixing the road, yes.
Right, so we have determined we don't need that money to finish fixing the roads, like the drainage on Shelburne Falls Road.
So
Does that have to be engineered and redone?
right, so
Looks temporary to me.
there are 64 miles of roadway in Conway. Of 64 miles, about 24 of those are gravel. Anybody who lives on Cricket Hill, Roaring Brook, Fields Hill, Graves, that's where the majority of the major issues happen from the storms. Currently, the grader we have is essentially unusable. We've had to rent one. You never know when that's going to be available to rent. So all those roads, all those 24 miles, we need the grader to be able to fully repair those roads. A new grader would cost above $400,000. Since I started 3 years ago, it's been up to for capital improvement committee to purchase a new one, but because of the burden of the cost, we've never put it on there, and there was never a highway stabilization fund to start putting money in to build up to it. So that's why
I
we feel
personally
it's
agree
appropriate.
with having a grader. We need a grader. We should have had one a very long time ago, and maybe we would have saved some money. You know, we're just dumping money into gravel and trap rock and popping tires, really. So I do agree with having a grader. I'm just wondering about other expenditures, like the drainage issue on Shelburne Falls Road. You know, the most used road in town. You know, I'm just trying to understand where the money's going and if we're going to get anything out of it.
We have another grant that just, that we're working on for the whole Pine Hill down to Shelburne Falls Road, that will take care of all of that damage. And so this is actually something that we're hopeful that we could actually buy a piece of equipment with grant money. That's not normal for some of you that work with grants. That's uncommon. But in this case, we looked into it, and they approved that we could use this money toward help us purchase this equipment. But the other grant is that, I don't know the name of the other one. Mass Works grant is going to take care of Pine Hill, Shelburne Falls damage, which if you see all the paving going on, you know.
I see you.
That's part of it.
That's part of it. That's not, that we wouldn't just pave it and not take care of the drainage. We fix it all, put in new things. Yeah, no, it's not. It's very well engineered, actually. Well,
Jim Moore?
Yeah, Jim Moore, Main Street. I'm probably the only person here who's a little bit hard of hearing, and I notice that some people talk into the microphone and some people kind of talk at it. It would be helpful if you put it right up here so you could really hear what you have to say.
You gonna sing?
No, I'm not going to sing.
How would you?
There you go.
Okay, it's working. Can you tell us how much money would be left in the disaster relief fund after this if it's approved?
Yes, I think at the moment we're just over 400,000 left in the disaster relief funds. And the majority, if not all of the work that's going to come out of there is on the gravel roads. So it just seemed to make sense because, you know, if you don't have a grader, you can't fix the gravel roads. And again, the idea of buying the used one, because we just can't afford a new one right now, just seemed to make sense. So that if this passes, then we'll have the grader and we'll have materials to finish the dirt roads.
Any other discussion? I hear a move to call the question since it was asked and seconded. Let's hear a voice vote on moving the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 95 for, 8 against, 1 abstention. Article 14. To see if the town will vote to transfer $52,000 from free cash for the Police Detail Special Revenue Fund or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to transfer $52,000 from free cash for the Police Detail Special Revenue Fund.
I have a second. Any discussion? Please wait. It's coming.
Lynn Hanley, Shelburne Falls Road.
Uh,
Lynn Hanley, Shelburne Falls Road. Can you tell me what the Police Detail Special Review Fund is?
Jan Warner, your treasurer. I can explain that to you. So in town, when we have a road project, we put detail officers out there to direct traffic and keep everybody safe. And the vendors that do the work actually pay for that police officer, but they're on the Conway payroll. So we pay them first. The vendor reimburses us plus an additional administrative fee. So this amount of money actually just pre-funds before we get reimbursement from the vendor. So it's actually not money spent, it's just a little, if you call it, savings account.
Any other discussion? Okay, let's vote on Article 14. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Article 14 passes 97 for, 8 against, and no abstentions. Article 15. To see if the town will vote to transfer $43,481 from the Ambulance Receipt Fund to the Ambulance Department Operational Expenses account for a partial payment for these expenses, or take any action relative thereto. This does say a 2/3 vote is required.
And just to remind everybody, Erica created this great warrant light article. On all the articles, there's a very brief summary of the the reason for the articles. I know that it's small font, so I apologize to people that can't read it.
My fault, I did that.
But you will see brief explanations in there, like for this, where it's a technical vote. So, that being said, I move that the town vote to transfer $43,481 from the ambulance receipts fund to the ambulance department operational expenses account for a partial payment for these expenses.
It's not, we should say.
Do I hear a second? Thank you. Discussion?
We think this is a majority vote, too.
Okay. Town council says they believe it's a majority vote, not a 2/3. Let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting's closed. Article passes, 109 in favor, 1 against. Article 16, to see if the town will vote to transfer $5,000 from the Grants, Match, and Administration General Fund into a separate Town Administration General Fund account to pay for the printing and mailing of a guide to Conway, or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to transfer $5,000 from the Grants, Match, and Administration account into a separate town administrator account to pay for the printing and mailing of a guide to Conway.
I have a second. Discussion.
Lori Block, I would like to know what the purpose of this guide really is about.
Okay. The purpose actually is so that people can, basically it's going to be broken up into sections. This is about Conway. This is all about the committees and everything that, how the town government actually works, trying to explain the budget, a lot of things that might come into play for town meeting, for instance. The idea is also to have it available for realtors, so that when people are moving into town, they have a nice guide about what goes on in Conway. I know we had had some packets that I think maybe churches had put out in years past, and I know people have worked on this. I'd seen one in Leiden. They put together something called the Leiden Fact Book, which is kind of where we took this idea. And just to let you know, the Grant, Match, and Administration Fund right now has $18,500 in it. So this would bring it down to 13.5.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, you can ask a follow-up.
Given that most of this information is widely available on the web, why can't this be downloaded as a print as per request item?
We can do that as well. As soon as it's put onto, put together and finalized, we will definitely have a copy on the web, and I'm sure you know that information changes frequently. But I think there are so many people in town who are not that familiar with how the government works in town, that it just seemed like it would be a nice idea to have a physical copy as well.
Yes, sir.
Jeff Lacey, Graves Road. Just wondering if it'll be a guide only to the governmental functions of Conway, or whether there will be feature local businesses, clubs, activities, events, other kinds of things that round out what goes on in Conway.
Yes, it's definitely going to be more tailored, obviously, to Conway. So there is a section on clubs and organizations and other special things about Conway. So we're going to make it, reflective of the town for sure.
Any other discussion? Okay, let's vote. Article 16. 5 more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes 79 for, 26 against, 3 abstentions. Article 17, to see if the town will vote to transfer $1,000 from free cash into the OPEB trust fund or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to transfer $1,000 from free cash to the OPEB trust fund so that the town may meet retirement costs of current and future retirees.
I have a second. Discussion? Let's vote. Article 17. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 96 for, 3 against, 1 abstention. Article 18, to see if the town will vote to appropriate $10,000 from free cash to pay for the tax title expenses or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to appropriate $10,000 from free cash to pay for tax title expenses.
I have a second. Discussion? Adam?
Lynn Hanley, Shelburne Falls Road. What are tax title expenses?
These expenses are those used for processing delinquent taxes. So sometimes we need legal assistance, or there's filing expenses, et cetera. It's not, most of it is reimbursable. So if you had delinquent taxes and we had to use an attorney to resolve that, the taxpayer would be responsible for that. So most of it comes back, but not all. Occasionally we need legal advice for the town as well.
Alex Caswell, Reedsbridge Road. Why is this not part of normal operating expenditures?
So it's always difficult to tell exactly how much we're going to spend each year. It depends how much we get, how many delinquent properties we have. And so by putting it in an article, it allows it not to expire at the end of the fiscal year, so we don't have to ask for it every year. That $10,000 will last multiple years. Again, hard to estimate exactly how long.
Thanks.
Any other discussion? Okay, let's vote on Article 18. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes 103 yes, 2 noes. Article 19, to see if the town will vote to transfer $10,699 from free cash to a debt service for the highway garage facility as a partial payment for that debt service or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to transfer $10,699 from free cash to pay for the partial debt service for the highway garage facility.
I have a second on the motion. Discussion? She's coming.
I'm just curious how much more debt we have.
Try it again.
It's not, okay. So right now, the highway garage is the only loan we have. We initially took out $988,000. And we are, oh gosh, I think we're maybe 5 years into it or so. But so when we first took out the loan, we decided to offset some of the initial loan payments with free cash so that we could stabilize the impact in your taxes. So because when you take out a loan at first, you have a very big interest charge each year, and that goes down. So this was an attempt to stabilize it so you don't see a big increase in your taxes in the beginning and going down at the end.
Any other discussion? Okay, let's vote on Article 19. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 102 for, 1 against, 2 abstentions. Article 20, to see if the town will vote to transfer $6,000 from free cash as a partial contribution for the future revaluation work account or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to transfer $6,000 from free cash as a partial contribution for the future revaluation work account.
I have a second. Discussion? Okay. Oh.
Lynn Hanley, Shelburne Falls Road. What is the future reevaluation work account?
So all of the properties in town have to be valued on a regular basis. And so every year we put a certain amount into the budget and then we save it up. And then when it comes to that year, and I believe, George, if I'm correct, it's 5 years? Yeah, okay. So every 5th year, we're going to take that money out to do that work. But we save it up periodically over the first 4 years till we get there.
Assessment. It gets
Assessment, thank you.
yeah, it's an assessment. It gets confusing when you say revaluation.
Any other discussion? Okay, let's vote on Article 20. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 95 for, 6 against, 2 abstentions. Article 21, to see if the town will vote to transfer $2,995 from free cash to the Field Memorial Library to help ensure its accreditation or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to transfer $2,995 from free cash to the Field Memorial Library to help ensure its accreditation.
We have multiple seconds. Discussion?
Beth Gershman, Hoosick Road. I'm totally in support of this article, and I'm just urging, and I'm very grateful to the trustees of the Field Library for their very careful management and the fact that they really only ask the town for this very tiny amount of money year to year, and I would encourage them to consider in the future asking for more money. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Article 21. Let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes 102 for, 1 against. Article 22, to see if the town will vote to authorize the following 2026 expenditure limits for the Town of Conway revolving funds pursuant to Mass General Law C-44, Section 53 and a half, and the Town of Conway bylaw, up to $5,000 from the Medicaid revolving fund, up to $6,000 from the dog licenses fund, up to $20,000 from the transfer station revolving fund, up to $10,000 from the newsletter revolving fund, and up to $20,000 from the Conway Youth Sports Program revolving fund, or take any action relative thereto.
I apologize for the repetition here, but I have to state it. This is an annual requirement. Comes up every year. I move that the town vote to authorize the following fiscal year 26 expenditure limits for the Town of Conway revolving funds pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53 and a half, and the Town of Conway bylaw, up to $5,000 from the Medicaid revolving fund, up to $6,000 from the dog licenses fund, up to $20,000 from the transfer station revolving fund, up to $10,000 from the newsletter revolving fund, and up to $20,000 from the Conway Youth Sports Program revolving fund.
I have a second on the motion. Discussion? Okay, let's vote on Article 22. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes 95 for, 5 against, 1 abstention. Okay, I need your help with the next exercise because you need to put your warrant down and you need to stand up and move around and relax and use the restroom if you have to. We need a little bit of a movement break.
Feels good.
Thank you for your cooperation. Okay, let's get back to work. Article 23, to see if the town will vote to transfer $14,052 from free cash for one-time costs associated with migrating the town's electronic files to Microsoft Cloud, or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to transfer $14,052 from free cash to pay for migrating the town's electronic files to Microsoft Cloud.
I have a second on the motion. Discussion.
Alex Caswell, Reedsbridge Road. Is there any protection, privacy protections from having our data at Microsoft and having them potentially mine our data?
I can tell you that 4 or 5 years ago, towns would not have been doing this, but things have changed so much. Like, we would have more physical copies, physical hard servers. Everything has changed so much that everything's going up into the cloud, including many, many government websites and other files. So In all honesty, I don't know that you can say that with 100% certainty that everything up in the cloud is secure any more than it's secure physically, but I don't know of any special protections that are being...
Well, my question is less about security and more like what is Microsoft doing with that data? Because all these companies these days are using this data to train AI and frankly surveil the American public, and I don't want to be part of that.
Well, no, neither do we. This is part of, we're transitioning right now to an IT vendor who will be taking care of all of the town's IT needs. And this is part of their package, but I can tell you we're not the only ones. I don't know what else to tell you except the technology, this is the way it's moving.
Okay. I just want to say then, so I work in information security for years. There's very little regulation about any of this kind of data going to the cloud, and yeah, everyone's doing it, and it's probably a very bad idea. You have multinational companies that are basically mining everybody's data and forming dossiers on the American public, and our current administration is actually using those dossiers to find people who are not on board with their agenda, and they are punishing those people and persecuting them. From a privacy perspective, I am against moving anything to the cloud that is not end-to-end encrypted. So I'm going to vote against this action.
I just want to say very quickly that I'm Lori, I'm the town clerk. Anything that is related to the data I collect on your street listings, your annual census, and your elections information is not included in any of this. That is a totally separate system that is maintained by the state. So anything the new IT company does will not be touching any of that personal data that I have for you.
Any other discussion? Okay, let's vote on Article 23. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion carries. Motion carries. 50 in favor, 38 against, and 8 abstentions. Article 24, to see if the town will vote to appropriate $43,419 for the administration and implementation of the town's open space and recreation plan, and to meet said appropriation, the town shall transfer the remaining balance of $43,419 in the Small Cities Grant Fund 416 to the general fund, or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to appropriate $43,419 from the Small Cities Grant Fund number 416 and transfer it to the general fund for the administration and implementation of the town's open space and recreation plan.
We have a second on the motion. Discussion? Okay, let's vote on Article 24. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes, 89 in favor, 6 against, 1 abstention. Article 25, To see if the town will vote to allow payment from the ambulance department for year 2025 operating budget or otherwise provide the sum of $1,036.37 to AMR of Massachusetts to pay a prior fiscal year bill or take any action relative thereto. The fine print on this says we need a 4/5 majority vote.
I move that the town vote to allow payment from the ambulance department fiscal year 25 operating budget or otherwise provide the sum of $1,036.37 to pay a prior fiscal year bill.
I hear a second. Any discussion? Okay, let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes, 91 in favor, 2 against, 2 abstentions. Article 26, to see if the town will vote to allow payment from the town administrator 2025 operating budget the sum of $678.80 to pay 3 prior fiscal year bills or take any action relative thereto. This also requires a 4/5 majority vote.
I move that the town vote to allow payment from the town administration fiscal year 25 operating budget or otherwise provide the sum of $678.80 to pay 3 prior fiscal year bills.
I have a second on the motion. Any discussion? Let's vote on Article 26. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes 90 in favor, 4 against, 1 abstention. Maybe their button's stuck. Article 27, to see if the town will vote to authorize the select board to request special legislation allowing Michael Habel to serve on the police department after age 65 until the date of his retirement or until his non-reappointment, whichever occurs first. Provided, however, that deductions from the service subsequent to his reaching 65 in connection with his service to the town for retirement or pension purposes, or take any action relative thereto.
I move that the town vote to authorize and request the select board to petition the General Court of the Commonwealth for home rule legislation to allow Michael Habel to serve on the police department after the age of 65.
I have a second. Any discussion?
Robin Yerkes, why does this have to be just 2 individuals? Why can't we make the whole thing up to 70, for goodness sakes?
State
Just a
law
thought.
requires a retirement, and you need special legislation for each individual to get them to be able to work past that.
Okay, that's crazy.
Gina McNeely, Main Poland Road. I just have a question about, it seems open-ended if he can work after the age of 65 until what age? Because it says date of his retirement or his non-appointment. Is there 70, 75? I'm just curious.
There is no specific cutoff point. It would be up to the selectman or the fire chief. Selectmen appoint police officers, so up to the selectmen to reappoint annually and at some point determine whether they would continue to.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
For Jim's behalf and everyone else, please speak into the mic. It's maybe it's hard to remember, but we can do it.
Any other discussion? We have over here? Yes?
This is more of a question about the meeting. Is it required for the moderator to read the question that is then going to get reread by the select board? Just seems unnecessary.
I understand what you're saying. I'm not required, but it's suggested that I read each motion, or each article. What is being read, I know it sounds the same, but that's a motion to deal with the article.
If you were to say Article 27 and then turn it over to be read by the select board, that might save us a bit of time. I don't want to waste any more time on this question.
Thank you.
Okay.
You could say as printed and then you do the motion. Right.
Okay. Any other discussion on this? Let's vote. Article 27. Okay, I'll do that. Wow. And can I just say,
Or just summarize it.
That's what I would do.
Or just summarize it.
You read them. Yep. 5 more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes 87 in favor, 5 against, 2 abstentions. Okay, let's explore Article 28 as printed. And basically, we're doing the same thing for Howard Boyden.
I move that the town vote to authorize and request the select board to petition the General Court of the Commonwealth for home rule legislation to allow Howard Boyden to serve on the fire department after the age of 65.
I have a second on the motion. Any discussion? Let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes 82 in favor, 2 against, 1 abstention. Article 29.
I move that the town vote to authorize and request the select board to petition the General Court of the Commonwealth for home rule legislation to eliminate the municipal caucus for the nomination of candidates for town offices as printed in the warrant.
I had a second. Discussion.
Give us a quick history lesson, Phil.
Phil Cantor, River Street. This is sad. This is a 260-year-old municipal tradition. This is one of the things that sets us apart from many other towns. It has struggled forever to get people there. People don't come. I, for one, always appreciated sending the police chief out to do a sweep of the Conway Inn to try to get the extra couple of people. And I thought it was one of the charming things about this community. I also, there are good reasons to do it. I understand. It's hard to administer. It doesn't seem to have a steady date. We tried it on different dates. It hasn't really worked. But I'd like to think that with a real redoubling of the efforts, this is one of those things that is, I just think it's a charming thing, and I would like to keep it. But I always thought instead, we can have it anywhere. I always thought instead of making people at the Conway Inn come to it to try to get our caucus, that we should just have it at the Conway Inn. But
I will say that the last caucus, if anybody wants to raise their hand who was there, you're a liar. Because the only people that were there were me and Lori. Literally 2 people. And you need, what is it, 35? 25. Only 25. And over the years that I've been here, we either go to the Conway Inn where people are drinking to vote on who is going to be your representative, or people from pickleball who just want to get back to pickleball.
this is us. These are the types of things. We don't have many civic traditions. It's hard to let them go.
My only comment is I think we should we should gather the representatives by horseback.
Any other discussion?
Oh, do you mind if I say one more thing on this?
Sure.
Sorry. So since if we vote to not have a caucus, the elected representatives would have to go out with their paperwork and obtain the signatures and sign the paperwork that they already have to sign, but they'd have to obtain signatures to be on the ballot.
Any other? Shall we vote?
If you vote, you have to, if you vote yet, you got to show up.
Yeah.
Or you'll get nominated.
That's.
Voting is open, Article 24. I mean, whatever. 29. Flipped it over. 5 more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes 62 in favor, 26 against, and 6 abstentions. They won't.
26 would have been a quorum. Just saying.
That was good, Chris.
They would. Okay. Article 30.
I move that the town vote to appropriate or reserve for later appropriation monies from the Community Preservation Fund, with each item considered a separate appropriation. $279,723 from fiscal year 2026 annual revenues to the term of $27,972 to the Community Preservation Historical Resources Reserve, $27,972 to the Community Preservation Committee Housing Reserve, $27,972 to the Community Preservation Open Space and Recreation Reserve, $13,986 for the administration of the Community Preservation Committee, and $181,821 to the Community Preservation Budgeted Reserve.
I have a second. Discussion? Let's vote. Article 31. Or Article 30, sorry. Yeah. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes 88 in favor, 3 against, 2 abstentions. Article 31.
I move that the town vote to transfer monies from the Community Preservation Fund undesignated reserve, with each item considered a separate appropriation. $289,308 from the Community Preservation undesignated reserve to the following: $96,436 to the Community Preservation Historical Resources Reserve, $96,436 to the Community Preservation Community Housing Reserve, and $96,436 to the Community Preservation Open Space and Recreation Reserve.
Do I hear a second? Discussion.
Quick question, are we still getting state match or partial state funding? If so, in what percentage?
Oh, hold on.
George Forcier, newly minted chair of that committee. Yes, roughly half, 50-50. It varies from year to year depending on the state's community preservation fund and how it's generated, but it's roughly 50-50.
It's actually 100% match. So the total amount is 50 for the town and 50 for the state. But we are lucky, fortunate that 100% matches.
Yeah, that's
there.
Thank you.
Same answer, different terminology.
Yes.
Any other discussion?
And one thing I'd add, if it's confusing to you that there are two articles in a row that talk about CPC funding, this is why. The first article we just voted on is appropriating the money that was raised for the coming year, raised this year, let's call it, between the state and us. The second article, the one we're talking about right now, is basically housekeeping. It appears, I'm told, that over the years we did not move the money into the proper accounts adequately, and so this is an adjustment being made. The money that comes in is divided into essentially 4 pots. One for historic preservation, one for community housing, one for open space and recreation, and a general pot for all of those things. And apparently we weren't putting aside the correct amount in each of those sub-pots, those specialized pots over the years. So this is an adjustment, moving money from the big pot into the sub-pots according to the state DOR's desires. So the money's the same, it's just been sort of shifted around a little bit, more for accounting purposes than anything.
Any more discussion?
Back here. C.S. Stewart, North Poland Road. Are there no CPA projects this year? I'm confused by that.
The projects that, again, I'm newly minted, but the projects that Conway historically has funded with CPC money or CPA money is based on applications we receive from various communities and entities in town. At present, there's just one application from the Cemetery Commission for some work at the town's the two big cemeteries in town. And that's the only one that is coming before us. At the same time, there's probably about a dozen projects that we've funded over the years that are still in process, many of them. Well, yeah, the pickleball courts, but that was funded previously. That's one of the in-process projects. There's a lot of money that's just set aside for those other projects.
Any other discussion? Article 31. Okay, let's vote. 5 more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes. 88 in favor, 2 against. Article 32.
I just wanted to state there's a misprint on the light paperwork where it says non-voting. That should say voting term. So I'm just going to read both if you don't mind. I move that the town vote to amend the general bylaws of the town of Conway, bylaw town officers, boards, and committees, section 2, as presented in the warrant. A yes vote would allow a planning board or zoning board of appeals member who moves out of town during their term to either remain on the board to serve out their term or be appointed to a 1-year voting term within 18 months of leaving Conway.
I have a second. Discussion?
Over here.
Ruth Bowman, Truce Road. Could you refresh my memory? I seem to remember that we had a long, somewhat contentious discussion about this. Was it last year or the year before? Last year. Could you just review that? I remember we voted it down.
Yes, that was last year. I was opposed to the article last year. The article last year didn't stipulate that it was a person who had already been elected that moved out of town after being elected. It could have been anybody that didn't live in town. This stipulates that if someone is elected to the position on the committee, that they, even if they move out of Conway, they can serve the remainder of their term.
Or receive another term, an 18-month term.
That would have to be approved by the select board.
Okay, thank you.
Gina McNeely, Main Poland Road. I was opposed to this last year. And
Gina, could you speak up a little?
Sure. Gina, Main Poland Road. I was against this last year, and I am again this year for a couple of reasons. One is planning and zoning are arguably two of the most powerful boards in town that can really affect change in our landscape and all sorts of other things. Also, last year's one of the main arguments was that people aren't stepping up to fill spots on boards and committees. However, zoning and planning, I believe by state law, are the only two boards or committees that can apply to have an outside the town member, and town council can check on that, but any other board can't do this. So I'm wondering why we would want one of our most important boards, both boards, planning and zoning, to allow out-of-town members of any kind as voting members, whether they were elected and then moved or not. Thank you.
Yeah, there's no statutory requirement that board members be town residents unless they're elected boards, because of course you can't run for office in your town unless you're a resident. So elected boards, you have to be a resident. But other boards, you don't have to have residents serving on the boards. Makes sense. But
Nope, right there, first.
Janet Shays, my understanding is this will enable Joe Stragowski to continue sharing his extensive 40-year-plus knowledge with the committee. He had to, for those of you who don't know, he was the first selectman for many, many years and then served on the planning board. And he had to move out of town because we don't have any accessible housing. He lives nearby. I understand his brain is very sharp, and this will enable us. All kinds of other committees have continued to tap into Joe's extensive knowledge, and I'm not on the planning board now, but so there may be some modifications, but that's my understanding.
Jeff?
Thank you. Yes, this was rejiggered after last year, tightened up quite a bit, so that only serving members who have experience and dedication to Conway may continue to serve out their terms, even if they move to Deerfield or Ashfield or Whately or whatever. And they also have the option, if they ask the select board within 18 months of their departure, whether they can be appointed for 1-year positions as associate members. And those positions are short, but they can be renewed. So they could remain as associates. But again, it's up to our select board. And if it's in the interest of the town, they'll do it. And if not, they won't. And I serve on the planning board now. We're a member short on regular member, and we don't have an associate. Joe was the associate before he left. So we're 2 positions down. Associates do vote if they're activated by the chair. And that has to be because there's a vacancy or somebody is sick or out or conflicted. But just as a final note, I've been here for almost 2 years now, having a great time in Conway, but I have not been able to get off the Shutesbury Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm still its chair. And I do that because I feel, after 30 years, some affection for my old town, and I want that board to succeed. And I want Conway to have the same kind of option with people who remain dedicated to the town and are willing to serve.
So the more subtle part of this is out-of-town members can be appointed for associate members for 1-year terms, plural. So ad infinitum. It's not that they just left the board and they can stay on for their remainder of their term. They can be associates, voting members forever, as long as the select board and not the town votes for them. The town loses that right to vote for their members. And other boards cannot do this, or we would have been trying. So this is an outlier that the Planning and Zoning Board are trying to circumvent the intent of the law.
Yeah, she had a hand up back there, George.
Courtney Gilligan, River Street. I guess this is, sorry, Courtney Gilligan, River Street, and I think this is kind of going off of the previous person just said. Is there any way to amend this? Is there any way to amend this that there is a cap on the 1-year terms, that it's not like a forever thing, that it's like maybe for 5 years or something like that, that we have a limit, not that we're kind of leaving it out there forever?
Open board spots right now.
George, you wanted to say something?
I don't know about Courtney's question about amending on the floor here tonight. I just wanted to respond to what Gina said. Gina, I don't think we're trying to circumvent anything. State law recognizes that planning boards and zoning boards, like you said, are really important to the town, and therefore makes this exception for those boards where they have associate members. Other town boards tend not to have associate members. And the idea of the associate member is so, it's like an alternate juror. You want to have a person in the wings who's listening to the testimony or information with respect to special permits, so that if one of the regular members is removed from the picture for whatever reason, the alternate can slide in, the associate can slide in and continue the process. You know, if we have a special permit process for a solar farm somewhere in town, which could take weeks and months to go through, you want to have that alternate juror who's there to help the process go forward. Also, special permits require 4 out of 5 votes. And if you are like we are now, down to 4 members with no associate, that means all 4 of us have to agree absolutely on that solar farm permit if we don't have all the seats filled and an associate. And that puts a lot of pressure on those 4 people. And theoretically, you could be down to 3 people on the planning board and still conduct normal business, but then we wouldn't be able to deal with special permits without an associate. I'd love to have a regular associate, someone that didn't live out of town, but the reality is you all are here today, thank you, but there's lots of, and most of you, by the way, I've seen in my travels in town on other boards, but there are not enough people in town volunteering to help on these boards that I don't think something like this is necessary or isn't necessary. I was in a meeting yesterday, and I was surprised when 2 of the people in that committee said they were on 4 boards. I thought I was the only one who was on 4 boards, but apparently there's lots of us. So this is something that will help those of us who are trying to serve the town in these various boards to do the job properly. Okay? The selectmen can pull the rug out on someone if they feel they're going off the rails. I'm fine with that. I trust these guys. So anyway, that's my response, Gina, to what you were saying.
Can I make a comment
Keith?
before? Oh, I don't know. Just in response to that question in the back, someone can make a motion to amend this, the warrant article as written, so that we're voting on limiting to 1 or 2 terms or 3, limit those 1-year terms instead of having it go on indefinitely.
Moderator has a move from the floor to move the question. And a second. We're going to voice vote this. All in favor of moving the question? Aye. Opposed? Okay, let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes, 69 in favor, 21 against, 1 abstention. Article 33.
I move that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaws of the town of Conway, Article 5, definitions of the protective zoning bylaws as presented in the warrant.
Second? Discussion. You can fight over it. Yeah.
I guess procedurally, I just want to point out that the next 3 articles are designed to address the question of accessory dwelling units in town. So if you take them collectively, they make a change in how people can have, an in-law apartment or, on their properties. So that's the main point I wanted to make. So the first piece we're voting on right now is just changing definitions within the zoning bylaw that are required for this change. And if you wanted, or if the moderator would allow, I could probably address the overall change that's executed by voting yes on all 3 of these coming warrant articles.
Yes. Keep it within 2 minutes.
I'll try. I was once told by a high school friend's mother that I was loquacious, so I didn't know what it meant, but she was right.
Understood.
And Jeff, bail in if I go off the rails here. Accessory dwelling units, right? This is the in-law apartment that people often build today to create another dwelling within their house for a mother-in-law or somebody. The state recently, we're here talking about this today because the state legislature last year passed a law that makes it easier and actually mandatory for towns to allow ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Before that, it was up to each town, and a lot of the towns, a lot of the fancy towns in the eastern part of the state would not allow ADUs. They didn't like them. Conway has, since the 70s, allowed ADUs. So we've been kind of ahead of the curve on that. But with passage of the state law, we had to modify our local bylaw to dovetail with the state's new requirements, okay? No choices there. The state said everyone has to do this within reason. And so we had to modify our ADU bylaw to comply. So what you're looking at here are those changes. You might want to know what changed, right? One thing that stayed the same is the number of dwellings you can have on your single family lot. In Conway, we've been able to, and you will continue to, be able to have really 3 dwellings on your lot. You know, a single family home or a duplex by right, and an accessory dwelling unit attached to one of those. So 3 actually, by right. No, that's not true. Jeff, the accessory dwelling unit requires a special permit. But the first 2 by right, the third one requires a special permit from the planning board. That essentially doesn't, well, the number of lots doesn't change, or number of dwellings, that's the same, 3. Other things have changed that make it easier to have an ADU, and in some cases a little bit more restrictive. So let's see if I can tick these off. Currently, or until the state passed its law, your accessory dwelling unit could be of any size. You could attach this thing to the side of your tiny home and build a McMansion, and that would be okay. The accessory dwelling unit would dwarf the original, but there was no restriction. The state law says, essentially, that accessory dwelling units can't be any more than 900 square feet. And maybe less, depending on the size of the principal dwelling. So there's a size limit imposed now that didn't used to be.
George, you're at 3 minutes, just so you know.
Yeah, I know. It's loquacious. Special permit process. Today, you would need a special permit to get that ADU if you already had a duplex. Under this law, the state says, no special permits. So the only thing you need to do is pass a site plan review, which is kind of us eyeballing your site plan. Make sure it's not some big problem. So it's easier in that respect, is to get an ADU past the planning board. Much more easy than the special permit process, which is very iffy and tougher. Currently, an ADU can only be attached to your house or inside it. You know, I could carve up my colonial into 2 houses, or I could attach something to the side of it. Under the new rules, you can also have a detached dwelling, so you can build a whole separate structure on your property, or build something into your tobacco barn in the back 40. So
Okay, George.
That's new.
George.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you. You only double your limit.
Thank you. Well, I was speaking for 2.
Pardon?
George has an impressive memory, but I only gave him this list a second ago, and you got a couple of them. That was great. But I just wanted to finish off the list of how this bylaw proposal and the state legislation is more liberal than what most of the state has had and what we've had. The permitting is easier, as George said. You don't have to go through a 20-step special permit with all that time and expense. It can be detached from the principal structure, which is brand new because they can't be now. They have to be part of that one building. ADU can be built off a single-family dwelling under this proposal, whereas surprisingly, the only place you can build it now is off a duplex. And how many duplexes do we have in town? Not many. There's also no occupancy requirements. Previously, one of the owners had to live in one of the units. Now, none of the owners have to live in either unit. And there's pros and cons of that back and forth, but that's a new state requirement that we had to buckle under to. You bet. And finally, there are the benefits of the state regulations which guard against impermissible and excessive regulation. So you have that going for you. So all in all, it's much easier to get an ADU in Conway under these state regulations and these bylaws which reflect those regulations.
Any other discussion? Article 32. Let's vote.
Yeah.
33, sorry. I feel like all of you right now. Five more seconds. Voting's closed. The motion passes, 79 in favor, 4 against, 2 abstentions. Article 34.
I move that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaws of the town of Conway, section 22.3, accessory apartments of the protective zoning bylaws as presented in the warrant.
Second. Discussion?
Hi, Ira Band, South Part Road.
You need to move the mic up to your...
Ira Band, South Part Road. I'm certainly voting for this. It's getting harder for our soon-to-be adult kids and adult kids to buy a home in this economy. But I have a clarifying question. It's on page 13. It's number 3 for detached PUADUs. There is a requirement that it be built within 100 feet of the principal dwelling. However, there are waivers. There's a waiver that can occur to go beyond 100 feet. This involves, if you are an abutter or a neighbor, and the adjoining property may go beyond 100 feet from their primary residence. I'm voting for this regardless, but I'd just like to know what is the criteria decision-making the planning board does? What is the different information regarding surroundings that gets taken into account? So I think that's relevant to anyone here, right?
So put this up close here. So the waiver is designed to give some flexibility, because when you have a hard and fast standard like 100 feet, that'll probably work in many, many cases, but in some cases, it could work better at a greater distance than 100 feet, possibly. But it all depends on the site, and you can't foresee that, so you build in a waiver. And what the criteria are is special circumstances of the site, its surroundings, which could be abutting properties, or the proposed design that negate the need for the imposition of the requirement. Or the objectives of this section may be met in an alternative manner, and that such a waiver or reduction will not derogate from the public purposes and intent of this zoning bylaw. So it's kind of like, it's a little bit like special permit criteria, it's a little bit like zoning variance criteria, but it's decided within a site plan review process on the same simple majorities that are required in that process. So anyway, I think it's pretty much got all bases covered. Mostly they should be within 100 feet, but if you've got special circumstances that you can demonstrate work, that could be waived or eliminated. So,
Any other discussion? Okay, let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. Motion passes. 78 in favor, 2 against, 3 abstentions. This was 35. 35. We're going to 35. Yes. Article 35.
I move that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaws of the town of Conway, section 23, permitted uses light industrial district of the protective zoning bylaws as presented in the warrant.
I heard a second. Discussion? Let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes 75 in favor, 4 against, 5 abstentions. Article 36.
I move that the town vote to adopt and enact the amendments to the Franklin Regional Council of Government, also known as FRCOG, as presented in the town warrant and handout.
Second? Discussion.
Philip Cantor, River Street. So I was the town's representative to FRCOG's Executive Council for a number of years. I'm very much against this. The FRCOG does a lot of really good things. There's a lot of really good people that work there. And the town gets a lot of benefit from being part of it. But they also have little soft spots. They've never really met a proposal for a high-priced consultant that they didn't like. And that the way that they're organized currently with the weighted average of votes, if Greenfield and Orange team up together, they get whatever they want. That's what happens. The fail-safe to that has always been the 2/3 of towns. So the only way that when I was on there that I was able to stop some of the spending that I thought was foolish was to convince enough of similarly situated towns as to us, as to size and fiscal conservatism, to vote no. What this does is removes that fail-safe. And so this changes it to just a majority of towns for any future charter revisions. And one of the things that FRCOG really didn't like was when we would get some of the pandemic funding that was sent to county governments throughout the state. FRCOG really didn't like having to pass that through to the towns directly instead of voting to spend it themselves, although some of that money would have benefited us. It was more in our interest just to have that money ourselves. So there are things that in the future that if they had their way, they would do that we would really miss the inability to stop it by just a majority vote of the towns, which is what they want. So we should keep it the way it is because that would keep the 2/3 requirement of number of towns to vote for any changes. So
Thank you.
We've got Bob Dean here in case from FERCog to speak to it if anybody.
Any other discussion? I got you.
Peter Jeswald, Old Cricket Hill Road. Could you just have the select board give their rationale for approving, submitting this, warrant article?
Yeah, well, I think we should, yeah, we actually have a member from FERCog here. I think would be best to discuss the article. Back there.
Peter, are you happy with that answer? You- I think it would be nice if they gave you an answer. We can let the man speak, but you guys should answer that question.
Yeah.
No, I think we want to recognize Bob Dean from FERCog.
Is he from out of town? Right? Okay.
He's from out of town.
Just hold
Hi.
on. We have a little technicality. You're not from town. So
I'm not.
I need a little vote to see if we're going to allow him to speak. All in favor? Aye. Don't even have to ask the second part.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Bob Dean. I work for the FERCog. I'm a neighbor of yours from Buckland, a member of the Buckland Finance Committee, been on the select board, town administrator. I appreciate all of you coming out today. And I realize that this article stands in the way of lunch. But I just wanted to make a statement right off the top that the proposed charter amendments do not make any changes to the formula that dictates town voting powers or financial membership commitment of the town. So that all remains the same. As you can imagine, after 28 years, there are some things in that charter that needed to be cleaned up. So that's really what this is doing, cleaning up typos. It is eliminating the FERCog as an arbiter of unresolved dog hearings. It does expand the potential municipal membership or representation so that the select board could appoint. Right now, it's just a member of the select board, but they could appoint a chief administrative official or a finance official as the town's representative to the full council. There's clarification as to how a town outside of Franklin County could join the FERCog, and also clarification of how a Franklin County town can withdraw from the FERCog. So, if there's any specific questions, I'd be happy to address those.
For Peter, it does not remove the authority of the select board. Phil, if you don't mind me using your example, I think you were discussing about the opioid funds as an example.
Yeah, pandemic.
Oh, that was before me. I'm sorry. Okay, got it.
Anybody else? Jim? Bob, 2 minutes.
Very short. Bob, could you make a comment on what Phil said? In other words, you said there's no change in voting. Phil said that we easily get voted down, but all 2/3 of the town can oppose something.
Well, Phil is correct in the sense that any future charter changes would be done by a simple majority vote in towns. It would still require 2/3 of those towns to approve that charter amendment. But in terms of the representation on a daily basis, the town is still represented by an appointee of the select board. For any future charter amendment changes, this is the first proposed charter amendment in 28 years. So,
Excuse me, if you'd like to ask a question, could you wait for a microphone so people can hear your question, please?
Would you like the microphone?
No, we did not.
Yes or no? Is it changing in the future from 2/3 to majority?
Bob? Yeah, Donna McNichol, your town council. I also represent the Franklin Regional Council of Governments. There are a lot of votes that take place at the Franklin Regional Council of Governments and in towns relative to that. So if we just start talking about, we need to talk about one specific vote and then the quantum of vote. The votes that the town representatives have at the FERCOG meetings that they've always had going forward are not changing. You will still have the same representative votes at FERCOG meetings to make decisions on how on the executive committee, on the Council of Governments, how they proceed and make decisions with the running of the organization. The one vote that is being changed by this charter amendment is that to date, it took 2/3 of a vote within the town to change the charter. It still takes 2/3 of the towns to vote to change, and the positive, to change the charter. But right now, it takes a 2/3 vote in each town. All that this is changing is that if a charter amendment comes back to you, you will have it will be a majority vote to approve the charter amendment, but it will still take 2/3 of the towns for the charter amendment to go forward. I just wanted to be so clear because we started talking very generically about quantum of votes, and there's a lot of different quantum of votes at the Franklin Regional Council of Government, and by far and large, the majority of those are not changing at all. This one change is in the charter amendment. Is that accurate, Bob?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I heard a move the question. Do I have a second? Oh, all right. Let's voice vote on that. All in favor of moving the question? Aye. Opposed? All right, let's vote. Five more seconds. Voting is closed. The motion passes 55 in favor, 22 against, 4 abstain.
Okay, but before we adjourn, I just wanted to mention a few things. As we stated before, there are open seats on the planning board, on the conservation committee, and in the capital improvements committee. As a reminder to everybody, also on one on finance committee. Also to remind everybody, Thursday, June 12th, please go out to vote. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Also, we have a new police officer. I know what everybody's thinking. He's not from Castaways. He's a real police officer. So introduce yourself to Officer Minor. So I just wanted to thank everybody again. I will move to adjourn until Thursday, June 12th, 2025, to the town hall between the hours of 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. to bring in their votes for various town officers as set forth in the town warrant.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
And thank
So
you, Jimmy
moved. We're
Recor.
adjourned.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you for your time and your patience.